Well, welcome everybody to our second session of our professional development course. As you know, my name is Aldo, and today we are going to work with how to be an effective teacher. And we are going to go through different issues and different questions that are related to the topic of being an effective teacher. We are going to be working with grammar, obviously, because grammar is a concern for all of us. We are going to be working with the strategies, we are going to be working with skills, and obviously we are going to be dealing with theoretical but also practical aspects of being an effective teacher. So, before we start with this, and if you go to a PowerPoint I attached to Edmodo, I uploaded to Edmodo, you are going to see that there is a slide that says stop, think, observe, and proceed from our previous class postings and assignments. And one of the things in order to be an effective teacher is to know what we are doing. And since we are teaching a language, one of the things we need to work on is our mistakes. And obviously, everybody makes mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. And all the people that you know and teach English may make mistakes because it's not our language, and it's fine. But the important thing when making mistakes is to be aware that we make mistakes, is to be aware that we need to monitor ourselves in order to improve the language, in order to improve our pronunciation, in order to improve in general the way we teach English and the way we acquire English. Because acquiring English is not an easy task. How do I know that? Because acquiring Spanish is not also easy for American people, for English people, or for people that do not speak our language. So if you go to slide number 3, it says, let's check this grammar. And I'm doing this gesture because I'm looking at another computer where I have my PowerPoint. And it says, the first one says, pay attention to something or to someone. You pay attention to. And obviously, in all the corrections I made, you are going to see that the majority of the corrections are related to prepositions, which is one of the most difficult parts of learning a second language. Then, knowledge, in general knowledge, you use it in singular, you don't use it as countable. So when you say, do you know how much knowledge I have? But you don't usually say knowledges. So sometimes people can use it figurative, but it's not a way that is grammatically correct. Then there is a very hot issue. You have help. Because I have heard both of them. Help someone do something or help someone to do something. Both of them are accepted. And actually, in American English, you hear all the time help somebody do something or help something do something or something like this. I guess my hunch is that help someone to do something is more British than American. Then, if we go, then you have two more, one major problem, one of the major problems, or what avocado and lemon pie are, blah, 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 because you are talking about the two of them, so it's plural. And then it says, I wrote in a different color, be careful with sentences and punctuation. I mean, you know that in Spanish it's very common that we say, I remember when I was at the law school. At the law school, they said that the more complicated and the longer the sentences is the best. That is not in the United States. That's not in English. Because here you have to write short sentences. Your sentences need to be simple, understandable, and it's a very good way to do things right. Why I'm telling you this? Because sometimes you write very long sentences, and when you need to put the verb, you almost forget what you wrote at the beginning. So sometimes you forget the S because you have something that in psychology is called the immediacy concept. The immediacy concept is because you look what it is very close to your word, and maybe what is close to your word is not the appropriate thing because maybe your subject is at the very beginning of the sentence. So My suggestion, my piece of advice is that you can go to a grammar book and check different things: the use of the comma, the use of the colon, the semicolon, the stop, everything, because the use in English is not the same as the use in Spanish. I mean, some things obviously, like the use of the period, is the same, but there are other things that are used in a different way. And I wrote there. Some of you wrote one sentence, and that sentence was the whole paragraph. I mean, that's not possible. Let's be honest. One sentence, one paragraph? No. And according to the APA manual, I don't know if you know that APA means American Psychology Association. This association is the one who rules how to write academic papers in the United States. And they say that in order to write a good paragraph, your paragraph should have at least 4 sentences. So be careful with that, because when you write a paragraph and the paragraph is one sentence, there's something wrong. So you should split that sentence into at least 4 sentences, or you need to connect this paragraph with another one. You need to do something because you are not writing properly. In green, you have consistency. And one of the consistent has to do with verb tenses. Sometimes you started writing in present, then you moved into past, then you shifted again into present, and then you talked in past continuous, and then sometimes it was a mess. So one of the things I do with my papers, because I sometimes have problems too, especially when you write, like I write 25 pages of something. What I do is I write the paper, and then I leave it in my computer like for 2 days. So what I do is after 2 days, I read it as if it were one of my students' piece of work. And I'm so mean to correct it that it's very easy for me to see my own mistakes when I read it again, but not when I read it again immediately after writing it, but when I read it again, like after 2 or 3 days after the day I write it. So I think this may help you a lot. So let me know if you do this and if it helps you. Well, then you have other problems there, and then if we go to the next slide, you also have other problems like these and these. I mean, the singular and the plural. Then answer to, provide somebody with something. Then I was giving some pieces of advice in relationship to how you use the plural and how to use the singular. And some of you were confusing, like you say everybody, and you didn't know if that was singular or plural. Sometimes you were treating it as singular, sometimes you were treating it as plural. Well, every time that you use those type of pronouns that are called indefinite pronouns, you have to use them with as if it were the third person singular. You have to say everybody goes, no one goes. I mean, you always need to use the inflection for the third person singular. This is just for you to revise some concepts. Maybe you are familiar with the concepts, but it's important to all the time being connected with this and try to reflect upon the problems we have. And it's not, maybe they are not your problems, but you are learning through the problems of the others. So then you have a slide that says, let's be on the same page, and you have 3 concepts that for us are very important. The concept of peer teaching or peer coaching, then you have the concept of class observation, and then you have the concept of lexical chunk. And I'm going to refer only to the concept of lexical chunk because you are going to work with a peer teaching and class observation with Alice, and you also have a definition there. But a lexical chunk basically is, what is a chunk? A chunk is when you have something clustered. I mean, you have more than one. So a lexical chunk is when you have a word or a phrase that you learn as a single unit. For example, the what I tell you here in the slide is when you teach your students in first grade, would you like a cup of tea? You are not teaching your students that would is a conditional, that is a modal. You are not teaching them that you is a personal pronoun. You are not teaching that. What you are teaching them is that this is an invitation. This is the way we invite people. Why? Because you are teaching them the whole sentence. You are teaching them not word by word, but you are teaching the whole phrase. So sometimes it is very important that you teach them lexical chunks. And I'm going to give you a very simple example. When we work with sports or when we work with places, let's imagine places. And you talk about the beach, you talk about the city, instead of teaching the word city or the word beach, you can start teaching like a chunk. For example, a sandy beach or a crowded beach or a packed beach or a wonderful beach. Or you can say a very populous city. Or you can say a 2 million people city. This is a chunk. The students are not learning one word. They are not learning words in isolation. They are learning phrases. And why is that so important? Because when they describe or when they go into writing, they remember those phrases. They remember those chunks. And according to Michael Lewis, who is the one who proposes the lexical approach, he says that it's a very good way for students to improve because they are not going to, if you learn words in isolation, then you need to connect one word with the other and then with the other and then with the other. But if you are learning lexical chunks, it's different because you are learning like part of the sentence. You have an idea. So it's more important for you. So this is the preamble of a question I have for you. And the question is, what are the characteristics of effective teachers? Who is an effective teacher? And I have to tell you that there is no one answer for this because you may be wondering at this moment, well, I think I am an effective teacher. And I can say I am an effective teacher. And maybe we are doing different things. So being effective is something that depends on the people. However, there are certain characteristics, there are certain concepts that are common in every teacher that is considered to be effective. And you may wonder what is to be effective. And I provide you with a with a with a with a short definition. And it says that effective is a person that is successful in producing a desired or intended result. So what is the result you want to get? The result you want to get is that your students learn. So when are you effective? You are effective when your students learn. And maybe some of you say, yes, and my students are learning, so you are effective. And you may be asking to yourselves, why I'm taking this course is that if I am already effective. I think that we need to be professionally growing all the time. And you know why? Because we have different types of groups. So maybe the way you teach a group you have this year is not the same way you are going to teach a group next year. So you need to expand, you need to learn more, you need to be exposed to more strategies, you need to be exposed to more theory, you need to be exposed to different ways of approaching teaching, and you need to be aware of different ways of approaching learning. And I think this is the most important part of this presentation, that you need to be aware that you need to be adapting and adopting all the time new things. I mean, I have been teaching for 15 years so far. And the teacher I was at the very beginning is so different from the teacher I am now. I mean, I am very happy teaching. I am probably the happiest person when I am teaching. However, I can say that the strategies I had when I started are not the strategies I have now. And I am very resourceful. I see myself as a resourceful person. I can deal with problems, I mean, faster than I used to do. And I am more relaxed and I am really enjoying my career. So this is one thing that you need to, I think you need to achieve, that you feel really good teaching your students. And there in the slide about being effective says that you will find a thread in Edmodo where you can write the characteristic of an effective teacher. So if you feel you are effective, if you feel you are effective, tell me what your characteristics are. And don't expand very much. Just tell me your characteristics. It may happen that you do not consider totally effective. So maybe you are here and you consider that an effective teacher is here. And you need to acquire some things that are between in this part. So what you are going to do is try to tell me what you need to get in order to be an effective teacher. Okay? So this is for Edmodo. So I'm going to create a thread and please answer to that thread. So all the answers are together. Because right now, and since we are in the learning process of using Edmodo, you are posting your answers wherever you can. And it's fine because at least we get your answers. But if I create a thread and you read the thread, immediately after says answer. So you click answer and you go till the end, like on Facebook, and then you write your answer, and it's a very good way of having all the different opinions together. So try to do that. And then in the next slide, you have some characteristics of an effective teacher. And these characteristics were adapted from an article I read that you have the link there if you want to go to the internet and have a look at it. I adapted some of those characteristics to our reality, but an effective teacher, in the first one, it says that it's a person that explains things clearly. And if you remember in our previous in our previous lessons, we were talking about instructions, we were talking about other things, and we are going to continue talking about those aspects. And one of the very important things when you teach is to explain clearly. And to explain things clearly, things have to be clear for you. So if you have to teach something and that something is clear for you, then it's going to be so easy for the students that you are going to say, well, that is a piece of cake. And there's an author, there's a psychologist, a very important psychologist in the United States called Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. And Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi says that one of the most important things to achieve success is to achieve flow. And do you know what is flow? Flow is when you are doing something without thinking you are doing it, when you don't pay attention to the time. Haven't it ever happened to you that your students or you say, la clase se pasó volando. Why is that? Because you were so interested, you were so motivated in doing this, that you don't pay attention to the time and you feel that you are doing something naturally. Your brain is not having any obstruction. You are motivated and you are doing something as if you were really engaged in what you are doing. Well, actually, you are engaged. So in this way, you create a class that is memorable and you remember the concepts as if you have just read about them. Then the second aspect is that an effective teacher is well prepared. And I congratulate you for being here. And Alice and I expect that you can squeeze this opportunity dry and you can learn more And obviously, learning does not come from listening to us, but to the exposure to books, to the exposure to other colleagues, also to listen to us. But at the same time, some of you have told us that now you are reading, you are going to you are surfing the internet, and you are exploring new things, and you are reading more material, and that's fantastic. That is what you need to do in order to improve. The third aspect is to have the objectives of the course and the objective of each class clear. And that's why it's so important that you read the syllabus, that you have your annual plan, and that you plan your lessons every day. Then a very good command of the language. That's why I I strongly suggest you that if you have problems with language, you can improve in several ways. Obviously, if you have somebody that knows more than you can always be exposed to learning in different ways. It can be formally or informally. Do you know what I did when I came to the United States? When I came to the United States, I started watching TV series, at least 1 hour a day. So I am exposed to English all the time. I read. Well, I have to read in English, but I also read for fun in English. And then I try to connect with people in English. So one thing you can do, well, one thing we are doing already is connecting with each other in English, which is great. But at the same time, we are creating a community of learners and we are learning one from the other. So I have seen that some people have rephrased phrases that you said that contained a mistake. So this is fantastic because you are learning, and this is a memorable thing because when you are spot a mistake, then you are learning in a very good way. Then um, help students make connections, know about methodology, being proactive. That is, for me, is essential. When you are an energetic person, when you want to learn more, when you want to do things, being proactive means that you want to do things because you want, because nobody's telling you to do things. The supervisors do not need to tell you to do things. You can do things on your own. You can learn more language. You can read books about methodology. You can do so many things. And you have a very important resource. Most of you, and I say most of you because unfortunately we don't have one in Paysandú, but people from Paysandú can go to Alice, Selva, I. You have the PADs. I mean, the PADs are people with more experience. There are people that can help you. There are people that have books. There are people that can tell you, okay, go read this, go do that. And that is so important. I mean, whenever you want to grow professionally, you need to find not only the resources, but also people that can help you and can mentor you. Mentoring is essential, and PADs are mentors, are people that can help us and can encourage us to do more things. Um, then promoting interaction, independent thought, and critical thinking. I mean, if I tell you do this, don't accept what I'm telling you. Try to be critical and say, well, I'm going to do this because I think or I am convinced that this is what I need to do. But don't do things because you just want to do them. Do things because you are really convinced of doing things. That is one of the most important things in motivation. That you need to incorporate something that is externally given, like the idea of doing something, into your intrinsic motivation. So then is a person that is perceived as fair. So that's why assessment is so important. What you say and what you do in class is so important. Sometimes we believe we are fair, but sometimes we aren't. And why is that so? Because we believe that we are fair, but with our actions or with our words, we are saying something that is not correct. Let's imagine this example. I'm going to say, Juan, what's your name? Okay, typical class, first grade. Okay, you, what's your name? My name is Juan. Good. What's your name? My name is Maria. Okay. Is good and okay the same? No. So what you are doing there, you are giving different feedback to almost the same situation. You have a student, you are asking one question, that is what's your name, the student is answering correctly, and you are saying good for one, and you are saying okay for the other one. Good and okay are not equal. So you need to find strategies to be fair when you give feedback, when you provide feedback to your students. Why? Because then your students realize that you are doing something wrong. Never underestimate your students, because your students are very smart and they know that there is a difference there and they are doing exactly the same. Another aspect, and I am happy that I read that you are doing this. uh, I read this in your philosophy of teaching, that another characteristic is to be approachable and caring. And almost all of you said that you like to work with emotional intelligence, that you like to be approachable, that you like to be close to your students. And some of you indicated other concepts, like being friend of our students. I would like to know more about those concepts, because I think you can create a friendly atmosphere. I think you can be very caring. I think you can be very supportive, but I wonder if you can be friend of your students. I'm not saying that this is correct or incorrect. I'm just posing the question so you can think a little more about this. And then takes into account students' emotions, and this for me is crucial. You need to take into account what is going on in your student's mind. If your student is going through difficult situations, the students are not going to be totally in mind to be in your class and to be responsive and to be affectionate and to be working. So you need to consider that. But you also need to consider your students' emotions in terms of interest. Be considered about them in terms of interest. What topics are you going to tackle in class? What is going to be your discussion? And try not to be judgmental, because sometimes you are judging things that for them are very sensitive. So you have to pay attention to so many things when you teach a class, that that's why planning is such an important issue. And we are going to work with planning in the following sessions. If we move to the next slide, I think it's number 5. It has been effective while teaching ESL or EFL. So it says have very good command of the language, clear explanation, and the teacher is motivated and motivating. Okay, so that means that you need to do it consciously. Well, let's continue with our previous presentation, and I was talking about the characteristics we need to be an ESL or EFL teacher. So I selected 3 main characteristics, like having a very good command of the language, giving clear explanations, and being a motivated and motivating teacher. Being a motivated teacher because you want to teach English, and you don't see it just as something you do in your free time. And then being motivating because your students are going to be so fascinated with you and with your classes that they really want to learn English. They really know, and they are really motivated to go to your classes, and learning comes just naturally. In terms of having a very good command of the language, I included some strategies that you can use. And one of them is peer teaching. And peer teaching is so important. And one of the things I was going to tell you, that it would be wonderful if you can actually visit yourselves and you can teach a class together. Like, one thing you can do is actually you can plan a lesson and you can teach the class together. Then class observation. Why not inviting a colleague and telling him or her, okay, why don't you go to my class and observe my class? And when you do class observation, you have to be very careful, because you are not going to observe anything. You can tell your peer, I want you to go to my class and see how I give instructions, and if my students understand the instructions. And that would be great. That can be the only thing that the person is going to observe. You can tell the observer, I want you to go to my class and observe how my students react to group work, or what I do right and wrong when I ask my students to work in groups. And that is so important because when you have another person that is giving you feedback on your class, you are going to be, more conscious about what you are doing. Then it's a self-learning and self-exposure to authentic material. I have already told you that you can watch authentic material, you can read books, you can do so many things that are going to be beneficial for you to grow professionally. Then professional development courses that like this one, and then self-monitoring strategies. And do you remember that at the very beginning I told you that one of the important things is that we need to learn to monitor ourselves. We need to know that we have mistakes. Well, this is what I was going to tell you. Um, we need to do, and we need to learn when we are making a mistake. So when we are making a mistake, we need to be aware that, well, this is a mistake and I can correct myself. So if I make a mistake and I correct myself, it's fine. And in this video, you may find this, that I make a mistake and I realize and then I correct myself. And it's fine because, as I told you, mistakes are natural, necessary. So if they are natural and necessary, it's because we are human beings. So mistakes are there. Then clear explanations. You have to know about grammar. You need to know about skills. You need to know how to teach writing, reading, how to teach listening, how to teach speaking, and how to teach to be critical thinkers. And then you need to know strategies and how to teach those strategies. And then to be a motivated teacher, and you have some ideas there. So let's begin with grammar. Grammar was one of the things I told you that it would be awesome if you can have a good book. This is one of the pieces of advice I give to my students, and is to have a very good grammar book. In my case, I have one book that I don't have it here, that is the grammar book by Diane Larsen Freeman. It's a very thick book, but it has everything, and it's probably the best grammar book I've found. Then I also have another book that is, it's called English Grammar, and is by, it doesn't come to my mind the author at this moment, but I will remember it in a moment. And one of the things I do, George Yule, Yule. This author is a great author, and his explanations are wonderful. So, in terms of grammar, and if you go to the slide that says grammar, it says, how much grammar do I know? Because we need to be honest with ourselves. How much grammar do I know? Why is that I have problems with prepositions? Because I have never read about prepositions. So why is that happening? Okay, we need to pay attention to that. So when you want to know how much grammar you know, then you need to know what are my students' prerequisites in grammar. If they are going to learn simple present, if they are going to learn past continuous, what do they need to know? And you need to know those things in order to teach that type of grammar to your students. What is the course asking me to teach? And a very common mistake is this one. In some courses you have to teach can, and can have different functions. So what if you need to teach can as permission, and you say I can swim, or can I swim? Sometimes you are expressing an ability, and then the examples you are giving to your students are not related to can as permission. So these are important things that you need to consider. So then I posed a situation there for you, and the situation says, let's imagine that in one of your course books we are asked to teach can, the same example I gave you. What is the function of can in this case? So I want you to go and look at the books you have and see what is the function of can in that case. Is it ability? Is it permission? Let's imagine that the lesson is in Uruguay in Focus 1 and the function is ability. I can play soccer. What if during the practice or in one of the tasks you say, Dad, can I go to the soccer field? So in this case, you are not talking about ability, you are talking about permission. This is certainly not the focus of what you are required to teach. It is off topic. And I think that can is one of the most confusing grammar topics because you have this ambiguity that you can teach grammar in one way or another and it's still correct. I mean, what I'm saying is that you can teach can for permission, you can teach can for ability, and still you are using can. So you can have a good grammar book, I told you before, then when you prepare the lesson, you can double check it. And sometimes what you can do is that you can you can when you prepare the lesson, you can ask someone else to give you feedback on that lesson. And then you can check what you have to teach. If what you have to teach is really what you are required or what you are asked to teach. If we go to the following slide, in the following slide it says approaches to grammar. And you know that there are basically two approaches to grammar. And probably there is a third one that is an eclectic one, a combination of the two of them. Because sometimes we not teach one or the other, but we are teaching a mixture of the two of them. So in the first one that is in red in your slide is when grammar is focused on language use and where we learn a second language by communicating in that language. So for this reason, it's said that grammar is taught communicatively, and you have Sells, Mursi, and Larsen Freeman, which is the grammar book I was telling you that is so good. And if you can, please buy it because it's a very good one. And there is a shift from fluency to accuracy. So let's imagine that a first grader says, my name Manuel. Obviously that student is not using the verb. But is the student communicating? Of course. So what you are promoting there is fluency, communication. And then little by little, you are going to promote accuracy. So little by little, you are going to promote that the students, instead of saying, my name Manuel, the student says, my name is Manuel. So what you have to do is to create communicative activities. You have to create activities in which the students have to use the grammar, have to use the language, but maybe using some strategies like the lexical approach or when the students are working freely with the language. It's not necessary to repeat like what we did in the old times, drilling and repeating grammar. Now you have to ask them to work in a very contextualized and fluent atmosphere where they are communicating ideas. The other way, the other approach to grammar is focused on the analysis and the lexico-grammar analysis. So what the students are doing is learning structures. So they learn the simple past, they learn the simple present, they learn comparatives and superlatives. These are structures. So they are going to learn that, but they are using it in a different way. That is more positivistic, okay? So the main objective now is to know the grammar structure and depart from the grammar structure and from the rules and then use the rules and then practice and then in that way, little by little, be a little freer. In the other cases, the other way around, they start in a very free way and they are acquiring the language in a natural and communicative way. So in class, students learn learn grammar by learning the grammar rules. That is the basic concept of this approach. And I have two examples for you. And if you go to the next slide, which is actually slide number 11, it says which is which. And you have situation. Look at the two activities and think of the approach to teaching in each case. And the first one says, read the following text and fill in the blanks with the correct form of the verb in brackets. And you have, yesterday I watched TV when suddenly I a noise, even though okay, you have the whole text there, you can read it. And this is a typical example, a typical exercise we do with our students. The second one is the same, but the approach is different. And it says, read the following text and fill in the blanks with the words given. And you have was watching, opened, was, and heard. Those are the given words. In this case, I gave only the words that actually go in the spaces. I should have put like one or two distractors, but I didn't do that because this is just for you. So if you go to the next slide, which is slide number 12, it says, let's analyze the first example. And it's the one that says, read the following text and fill in the blanks with the correct form of the verb in brackets. In this case, what you are doing is learning structures. What you are doing is, and if you go to the title of the activity, it says, read the following text and fill in the blank with the correct form of the verb in bracket. Correct form of the verb in bracket. So my focus as a teacher is on form. I want them to know the structure. I want them to distinguish what is simple past, what is past continuous, if there is any other tense, etc. And then it says, I can do this without understanding the meaning of the text, because here it says with the correct form of the verb in bracket. The passage starts with yesterday, so I assume that then the verbs are going to be in the past. So I can say watched, heard, was, opened, was, and was. And it's correct, and I don't need to communicate anything, and I don't need to understand the message. I just need to know the structure. And as it says there, you need to find the time reference. So if you know that an action is performed in the past, you know that you have to use past tense, etc., etc. So this type of task is called exercise. And this is a big difference between exercise and activity, or exercise and task. Why? Because a task is an activity in which the students need to work in a way that they are communicating. It's like they have a problem that they have to solve, and they have to find the solution, and they have to use the language to communicate that solution. Whereas in the other case, what they are doing is they are just solving the fact that, or solving the problem that they have some verbs and they need to put the verbs in the correct form. So the exercise is mechanical, and the task and the activity are not mechanical. You have to think, you have to reflect, you have to act upon a problem that you are given by the teacher, and that is called a task. So if we go to the second example, you are going to see that the words are given. So if I give you the words already, I mean in the correct form, if they are in the past continuous, if they are in the past tense, if the verbs are conjugated, is because I'm not focused on structures. I'm not focused on grammar. What my focus here is communication. I want them to know where each word goes. So yesterday I TV. So what I'm going to do with TV? Which of the verbs collocate with TV? Obviously was watching. But that's why it's so important to learn lexical chunks, because here the students immediately know that it's watch television and not see television and not glaze television, not any other word except watch television. So in this case, they are going to discover that the lexical chunk is watch television, and they are going to discover. But they are learning the content. and they are working with communication because they are working with the meaning of the text instead instead of working with the structure. Okay, then you'll see more about, I mean, Jimena and Alice are going to work with two classes where you are going to see the differences I'm working here. Another aspect of being an effective teacher, and we can go to slide number 15, is to give instructions. And I have said about instructions that you need to pay a lot of attention to instructions, because sometimes we give like a whole paragraph of instructions to our students, and our students don't understand, because you say, well, let's work in pairs. Now you are going to open the book on page 45 and we are going to do exercise number 3. In exercise number 3, you have to mark true or false and you have to read the text. This is too much information. So if you have a look at the slide here, slide number 15, which is an adaptation of Jeremy Harmer, the Essential Teacher Knowledge book, it says that instructions needs to be short. And what happens when we have to say a lot of things, when we have too much information to give? Okay, do this. One sentence that is short, then another sentence that is short. Or, for example, let's open the book on page blah. And then you can say, now let's do this. Now let's do that. You can split the instruction into smaller chunks. They have to be simple. And then it says break down the instruction into manageable chunks, make instruction logical and coherent. So don't start with something that is very concrete. Let's start from the very general into the more concrete. Demonstrate or model the task. Sometimes you can say, okay, what you need to do is this, and then you can perform something as an example with one of the students, or you can perform this with one, I mean, you can do it yourself. Then you don't need to give instructions all at once. That's why you can break them into smaller chunks. And then you have to check instructions. That is crucial. You have to check instructions because what is the high frequency word, or what is the high frequency answer when you give instructions? You say, ¿entendieron? Or did you understand? And they say yes, and that is not true. I mean, because when you ask, that usually is not the truth. So what you can do is you can ask one of your students, did you understand? Okay, who can explain? Even if they explain in Spanish, it's fine, because they have a very simple way of explaining, and that will help you to be successful in performing that task. So if we go to the next slide, you have a scaffold. I mean, scaffold is andamiaje, and scaffolding is one of the most important things you are going to use in academia, and you are going to use when you are teaching English as a second language. And here you have like an ascending diagram that says that instructions are the departing point for any type of activity. But when you give instructions and the instructions are simple, they are coherent, they are manageable, when you have those type of instructions, then, or even instructions can be used as a transition. Because sometimes you can, let me give you an example. Imagine you are working with you are asking them, okay, tell me different types of animals. And let's imagine that 50% of your students name the word dog, or name the animal dog. What is your favorite animal? And they say dog. And then you can say, okay, the other day I was reading a newspaper and I found an article about dogs. So I want to share this article with you. Let's read together this article about dogs. And this might be a text. This might be a text you have in one of your books. This might be a text you find in the internet, but the important thing is that you have this available for your students, and through the instructions you are making the transition in order to the reading activity. And these instructions serve as part of the scaffolding. So after students understand the title and the instructions, they feel they can do it. And when they feel they can do it, this is called competency. They feel competent that they can do an activity. And if they feel competent they are going to do an activity, guess what? They are motivated, because competency is one of the main characteristics of being motivated. So now what we are going to do is focusing on the task. When you have the instructions, when you have clear instructions, when they can do whatever you ask them to do, then we need to focus what they are going to do now. Are they going to read? Are they going to listen? Are they going to write? Are they going to speak? Are they going to think in this activity? Or they are going to do all together? That is called integration of skills. So are you going to focus on one skill, or are you going to do an integration of skills? So if you go to the next slide, I'm going to work with the skills in general. So in general, what you need to know is that when you work with the skills, you need to create some pre-activities. So some activities you do before actually performing the task. Some activities, some ideas or some things you need to consider while working with a task, and then some things you need to do after performing the task. So that is in slide number 17. So you have all the activities there, like all the ideas there. So when you use pre-activities, you have to use more than one task sometimes, depending on the level of the task you want to get. Let's imagine your students are here and you want to do this activity that is here because of vocabulary, because of complexity, wherever. So maybe you need to do an activity to get to here, and maybe you need to do another activity to get to here. So when they get here, they are at the proper level to do the activity. You can do a pre-activity to activate schemata. And schemata is our experience, is what we have in our brains, is everything that we learned, is that what we need to retrieve when we are going to do an activity. And is a connection that will help us to not only to be motivated, but also to have the proper vocabulary, to have the proper structures in order to perform the task. Then you need to work with people's feelings, as we have mentioned, and to connect students with their experience and their context, provide the proper scaffolding, set the context, because you cannot teach, or you cannot ask them to perform a task out of the blue. What you have to do is to prepare, or you have to set the scene to perform the task. So you cannot just say open the book on page 46. You have to say, like I did with the dog, you need to prepare the context for reading. So reading does not come out of the blue. And then you have to give students useful language to promote achievement. I mean, because everybody wants to be successful. Then what happens with the task? The task should be communicative. That's what we said. Then they need to be challenging. That means that if the students are at this level, you need to be sure that the task is at this level and a little more, so it's challenging, but it's doable. So that means that they need to believe they can do it, and they need to be able to perform it. Then it needs to be authentic, because if it is authentic, if it is something that usually happens in their daily lives, for example, when you ask them to write something, when you ask them to write a biography, is it common for them to write a biography or to read a biography? Maybe it's not that common. Maybe you can ask them to write a review about a painting or about a film they watched. That may be more common for them. Or maybe to write a description of the actor of the latest film they watched. I think that is more in their world than writing a biography. Writing a biography for me, I don't know, it's something personal. I don't like writing biographies, so I think that is quite a difficult task, and it's not very authentic. Then students must know the how. So if they are going to write something, they need to know how they are going to write it. They need to know the layout. They need to know the vocabulary they need to use. You need to provide them with different things. It needs to be purposeful. Why are they going to write a letter if there is no purpose? Some teachers do something that for me is very interesting. Some teachers, especially in first and second grade, they write letters and they exchange the letters with people from other cities, from other countries, from other high schools, and that is purposeful because they are knowing people. Even though they can learn them on Facebook or they can learn them about them, they can meet them virtually. They can also use other sources like writing a letter to do this. Then, with an information gap, which is important, and there should be some opportunity for feedback. So that's why there needs to be some interaction while performing the activity. And the last thing I recommend about a task is that it's a problem-based learning, because when it is a problem-based learning, students, one of the most important things is that I'm not going to solve the problem the same way you are going to solve the problem. So when they get together and they work in groups, they are going to find different solutions to the same problem. And this is cooperative work. And this is so important for us that I think is valuable for us. But what happens when they perform the activity? What happens after that? And my suggestions here are like students can connect the task to their own life. So you can tell them how this will help you in your daily life. Or you don't need to ask them. Sometimes the activity is very connected. Like the other day, one teacher was sharing with me an activity he was doing, and he was asking the students to take photographs of their neighborhood. And what they were doing, they had to find a spot like a field or somewhere where there's nothing, and they had to create a project, and they had to create a place that they were going to build there. And that is very meaningful because maybe they want to have a club, maybe they want to have a disco. And so there were so many projects, and that was a very enriching activity, and the students were absolutely motivated. Then uh, you you should provide them with opportunities for reflection, and you should continue with the flow of the class. So after the task, what can you do in order to keep on working with the same content? And you should find a natural transition to preserve the flow of the class. And please keep the communicative approach. So what are the skills? There are 4 skills: writing, speaking, reading, and listening, and you have that in slide number 18. And these are the traditional skills, as it says there, but some people, and there is a traditional classification. The traditional classification is that there are some skills that are passive and there are some skills that are active. For example, when you listen, they say that this is passive because you are not doing a, a single thing. You are like just passively receiving what the other person is saying or what you are listening from the radio, whatever. The same happens with reading. Somebody writes something and what you are doing is just receiving information. And they say that there are two active skills that are writing and speaking. Why? Because you are producing. But there are some authors more modernly that say that this is not true, because when you read, you have reactions. You have reactions in your mind. Sometimes you ask yourself questions. Sometimes you say, I don't agree with what this author is saying, or you cry, or you like something. And this is a natural consequence of the interaction you are having with the text. And when I say with the text, I say the oral text, or I say the written text. So this classification of active and passive is somehow challenged by modern authors nowadays. So one important aspect that is new is that there are some authors like Kislik, that is from this year, that they say that he says that critical thinking is a new skill. And this is so important to have it in mind, because you are not asking your students to repeat, you are asking them to be critical, to be autonomous, to be independent, to have their own voice. That is so important. So that's why he suggests to use critical thinking as part of our philosophy of teaching, um, to turn mechanical activities into thinking activities, so communicative activities, to promote problem-based learning and project-based learning, to provide students with opportunities for reflection, uh, to promote lively discussions in class. So sometimes with basic topics like what are best, what do you prefer, dogs or cats? What is the best pet? This can be a whole discussion. This can be a whole class discussion. So sometimes you can provide them with those fruitful and enlightening and very juicy discussions in class. So these questions I have there are going to help you use critical thinking as one of the skills. So then you have some tips for listening and some tips for all the different skills. And in the case of listening, I have developed three. One is to create the context for listening, because one of the things that happens with listening comprehension is that you cannot see the person. So when you cannot see the person, what happens is that you miss the body language. So when you don't have body language, you understand less than when you can actually see the other person talking. That's why I also filmed this video, because listening to me is not the same as listening and see me at the same time. Then you have to expose students to authentic or pseudo-authentic activities. I have already mentioned that. And then you have to, the last characteristic that is for me probably the most important is that they need to listen in order to perform the task. And why I'm saying this? Because sometimes, because we want to do it to create the exercise in an easier way, we do, I mean, we write exercises like Titanic is a, and then we give three options: movie, song, or play. It's so, I mean, do they need to listen to know that? Obviously they don't. I mean, this is so, I mean, it's information that is so common for all of us that students don't need to listen to anything in order to answer that question. And you have an example there in the slides. So basically these three characteristics, and you have some explanations in the slides, on the slides, sorry. Then you have some tips for reading. The first thing is that the characteristics of the text. I mean, for ciclo básico, it should be between up to 200 words, and for bachillerato, between 200 and 400 words. And you have to make something that is very interesting, and is the five-finger theory. The five-finger theory says that if you go to the first page or to the first paragraph of the text, and you say, okay, I'm reading the text, and you say, well, my students don't know this word, don't know this word, don't know this word, don't know this word, and don't know this word. If they don't know more than 5 words, sorry to tell you, but the text is not appropriate for your students. So in that case, you have to find something else. Then authenticity. The text should be authentic. You can take it from the internet, you can take it from a book, you can take it from wherever you want to take it, but it has to be authentic. Sometimes you have to create a text, and that's fine, but try to be authentic. I mean, sometimes you say, well, I'm teaching past tense, which is something we usually listen. And sometimes you create texts that are all in past tense, and they don't make any sense, because sometimes when you tell a story in the past, you use past perfect, you use present perfect, you use simple past, you use past continuous, and it's fine. You use modal verbs in a past reference. So in those cases, you have to use the appropriate tense. Don't make everything in the simple past to make it fit your student's level. Do it in the right way because this is the way you should do it. But then when you read it, if they don't know 5 words, then the text is not for your students. So be careful with that. Again, the purpose for reading. They need to have a purpose. If they already know the answers, they don't need to read the text. And then the follow-up activities. You have read the slide and you are going to find more information there. Then some tips for writing. And in the tips for writing, you are going to see some aspect with Alice, I think. But first of all, the authenticity of the writing activity. Sometimes instead of asking them to write a letter, you can ask them to write an email, which is more authentic for them than for us. Process writing is essential. And you have to write and rewrite, and they need to know that writing is something that takes time and takes effort, and sometimes they are not going to write well in the first time. I mean, they are going to receive feedback and maybe they need to write it again and again and again, but everything is part of the process. And sometimes you can use classmates' feedback to help them improve their writing. And then it talks about strategies and obviously be constructive. Don't write feedback that is not effective for your students. So don't write feedback that is negative. Try to say, you can improve this by doing this, this, and this, and this. We are going to see this when we work with feedback. But again, it is important that you provide them with scaffolding in order to improve the way they write. Finally, we have some tips for speaking. And for speaking, again, authenticity. I mean, try to create dialogues and situations that are authentic or pseudo-authentic. And try to move the student from some controlled practice into some free practice. Even if they make mistakes, don't interrupt them. Try to let them communicate freely. And teach body language and interaction. Teach them that. Teach them like hesitation sounds. Teach them ways of expressing anger, intonation. Teach them those things that make the speaking activity more vivid. And in one of the books, that is the Red Book by David Harrington, there are a lot of activities to improve body language. Like there is one that I like in which the students have to be in silence and they are looking at the other person's eyes. Only this. Because sometimes it's so difficult to look at the other person's eyes when you are speaking. But it's so important because sometimes you feel very shy or you laugh because you are nervous. So try to do those activities, which I strongly recommend. And then you have to give them or provide them with communication strategies and promote fluency. Then you little by little work with grammar and then work on pre-speaking activities that you are going to see some, I think, with Alice. And then I would say that I have a slide, which is slide 24, that says nothing succeeds like success. So if the students realize that they are being successful, that they little by little achieve their goals, they are going to be motivated. And in that case, your students are going to be great. They are going to have a fabulous performance. A way to promote success, which is one of the things I told you, is by teaching strategies. And you have some strategies there, like compare and contrast, list, define, order, classify, describe, predict, explain, analyze, integrate, justify, infer, discuss, evaluate. And you may know more, and with Alice, I imagine you are going to see more. And then you have a classification about strategies. where you have the different types of learning strategies, and you have metacognitive, cognitive, memory strategies, social and compensational or compensation strategies. And cognitive strategies are those that you use when you are learning. For example, when you are solving a problem, where those are cognitive strategies because cognition is going on. Metacognitive strategies is when you think how to learn. When you are reflecting, for example, what did we do in this activity? And when your students are reflecting upon what they did, and they realize that they did that and that and that and that, that is metacognitive. Because they are thinking above learning. They are thinking learning how to learn. Memory strategies, we all know what memory strategies are. I mean, there are strategies to memorize things and to retrieve things from memory. Social strategies are those strategies that we use when we are in connection with other people. They are interpersonal strategies. And compensational strategies is when you don't know something and you want to retrieve from memory. For example, when you say, let's imagine you don't know the word tree. And you say, well, I want to say this thing that you have in the parks, that it has green, it's green and brown, and it has green leaves, and some of them have apples. Ah, okay, that is a tree. Because you are compensating the lack of knowledge or the impossibility of retrieving information. And what you are doing, you are providing another way of knowing what I want to express. And then you have some things here in which strategies are strongly ruled by three different concepts that are culture, learning, and content instruction. And then you have 5 items there, like questioning patterns, feedback patterns, attention pattern, response time, and classwork pattern. This is adapted from Shelley Race. And one thing she says is that sometimes we have students that do not talk. And we believe that they do not talk because they they don't know or because they don't want just to communicate. And she said, have you ever thought what is the treatment they receive at home? Do you know if their opinion is important at home? Because sometimes when they write, when they are tested, sometimes we know that these students are wonderful students, that they know a lot. But this is not what happens in class. And sometimes those students are not considered, or their opinions are not considered at home. And that's why they don't want to communicate. Or sometimes they feel frustrated to be in front of other classmates. I mean, there might be many reasons, but we need to find out why those people cannot communicate in our classes. So culture can be one thing. I'm going to tell you a very brief anecdote. Last summer I was working with some Asian people, and they didn't want to work in groups because for them, if they make a mistake within a group, they lose face in front of the other people. So this is a cultural thing. So they need to work individually. So we need to work and we need to know why people do this type of activities. Okay, this is more or less what I have for you. The last slide you have there is an assignment. And the assignment is choose an activity from one of the course books you are currently using. It can be any type of activity, and define whether the author is focused on one skill or if it is an integration of skills. And then you have to describe the type of students you have in terms of assumptions. I mean, what are your assumptions toward your students, possible anticipated problems, and knowledge gaps. Plan some pre-activities and post-activities. And then you are going to send it to another participant. So you are going to send them to another participant, and you are going to ask that participant to give you feedback. And then you are going to submit the plan, and you are going to submit the feedback all together. And you are going to submit the feedback and the plan to a thread I'm going to create in Edmodo and where you can see it privately. I mean, I can see it privately, so I can give you feedback privately too. Okay? Well, that's all, folks, for this time. See you in October, and I hope you have a great time next Saturday with Alice. Bye bye.